Hey everybody. Hey Megan. Thanks so much for coming. Thanks for being here for our third artist talk in a new series titled Visual Voices. This series celebrates diverse perspectives and practices in studio arts and aims to foster dialogue, connection, and inspiration through the lens of contemporary visual arts. This series is free to attend, which has been made possible in part by the generous financial support of the Rochester Area Community Foundation, and will continue monthly with new artists through December 2025. Our artist next month, on October 4th, is ceramic artist Kyle Scott Lee. This event is being recorded by videographer Maggie and the edited recording will live on the Flower City Arts YouTube channel. And at this time, I'd like to remind you to please silence all of your devices. We're thrilled to have Scott McCarney with us today. Scott is an artist, designer, and educator based here in Rochester, New York. He has been making books as art objects since the 1980s. His book works can be found in public and private collections all over the world, including the Museum of Modern Art, Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, Museum of Contemporary Art Chicago, Victoria and Albert Museum in London, and Yale University Art Gallery, among others. His teaching and lecturing itinerary has taken him to Australia, New Zealand, Korea, New Mexico, and South America.
And New Mexico.
We're so honored to host Scott this afternoon to share with us. So please join me in welcoming Scott McCarney.
Thank you, and thanks, Megan, for the invitation, and Flower City Arts Center for hosting. Yeah, so I was, asked if it was going to be okay to videotape the talk, and I told Megan that that'd be fine as long as I don't have to, watch it or listen to it, because I'm not really big on my voice, or how, my look isn't so bad, but just in movement. But then like this, they asked for a picture, and we ended up like with this for a major intro to the talk. Anyway, so I just ran with it, and so what you'll be seeing is sort of like a spin-off of this. A little bit maybe of not a discomfort, but just like a learning curve maybe of this. So this may be the root of this idea of where I have, in terms of professionally. This was a flyer that was announcing an exhibition I had at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts in Richmond in 1976. So that was a long time ago. I don't know what possessed, I don't know whether it was me or they decided to use this image, I'm not sure. But in any case, since then I've been a little hesitant about the use of my image and publicity around my work. Anyway, yes. Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm a low talker, so don't hesitate to interrupt me if I'm getting too low. So what I'm going to do is to run you through a few different projects that I've, that span pretty much as long as I've been working, as you'll see. This first one, it's a set of autobiographies. There's 4 volumes in this guy that were done in 1999, and they were all drawn from files of ephemera that I'd found of myself while cleaning out a filing cabinet at the end of the millennium. And what I was finding were like these things, to-do lists, which I had kept over the course of about 3 years, I think, which were little checklists of, jobs, correspondence, things like that went not exactly monthly, but whenever the page got filled, I would sort of keep adding on to this. And what's interesting is that it was kind of a good, key of what exactly was getting done, what wasn't getting done, what was forgotten. Things would just drop off without being checked off. But I had done a small edition of this and had printed it on the backs of basically proofs of work that I had been doing. I've been doing a lot of book design, composition. So the interior space of these pages were representative of things that, were either checked off or not on the inside of this through here. The second autobiography is rejection slips. This one was 20 years worth of letters that I had received from different institutions, and as you can see by the size, they're about a quarter or a third of the size of the originals to kind of lessen the rejection, I guess, in here. But the thing with collecting all these, you can see these are 4 letters, 4 consecutive years of rejection from a fellowship at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, the same institution that gave me a one-person show, not that, sooner than what this happened. This is my absolute favorite, the Mid-Atlantic Arts Foundation. Sorry that I didn't get a grant, but instead of, just leaving it, the director crossed out Mr. McCarney and wrote in Scott, just to make, to make the rejection that much more personal, I guess. So another file, and I have this is like almost a whole file drawer of pictures that other people have made of me. So this was a gleaning of pictures of me with famous and important people. So, I mean, at that time of one's life, Santa, and then this is, and the dark beard is my oldest brother, Hugh. But there's also a number of, more kind of significant people, as Ralph Gibson is in there, and Catherine Lord, and in some other places there's Charlotte Moorman and things. But anyway, this is all of these have different formats, and they're actually printed in different ways from different printers that I had, laying around. I don't throw anything away, as you can probably tell. But this is a sort of a variation on that, little quick zine fold. But it's a 16-page, and it's folded in a way that makes a spine, so you have this nice kind of gatefolding way of revealing the information. The last in this set is the homemade maps, and this one was all these handmade maps that people would make for me when I was traveling, for the most part, to show me how to get from one place to another. Though this one here I like, because this was a group map. I was teaching, and it was a group of grad students, and we were kind of waiting, I think it was like end of lunch period or something, and sitting around, I suggested we should draw a map of the United States. This is groupthink. So, I don't know, there must have been maybe a half a dozen or more of us there. Well, this is what we ended up with this, Mississippi River that, guys, really is quite the drift between the East and the Midwest there. But generally there were just these wonderful drawings that people had made that at the time I guess they made some sense, but now they're just as drawings. I think they're really quite nice. And these were this was printed on a large sheet in like an architectural plotter, like photocopier, folded down into like this snake map fold that made it very unwieldy and very much like it was, had fallen out of a glove box in a 1968 Beetle or something on that. So just to emphasize like the obsolescence of all of these things, we carry all this in our pocket, right? We don't really keep to-do lists. We have our calendar. We don't get paper things in the mail. We get in the inbox much more quickly and efficiently than is necessary, I think, for rejections. We have a camera in our pocket. Rarely do these things ever end up out in print. And then, of course, the maps. I mean, we have a map. So all of the stuff that I had been collecting are no longer to be collected because we don't need them. This is me channeling Marcel Duchamp in his female doppelganger guise of Rose Salvé. Duchamp, you probably all know, is a very influential artist from the 20th century whose work and practice and ideas have pretty much permeated everything of contemporary art. And I've been a really big fan for a long time, so a lot of things that I do could be attributed to, thinking about some of his ideas. So, one of the things that he had done, which is called the box in a valise, but the full name of this was, my new eyes fail me here. It's the it's the boîte de la valise, box in a valise from or by Marcel Duchamp or Rose Salvé. And this was in 1935, and it was an edition that was put together between 35 and 41. So this is a pretty good time period here. So what he had done is to pretty much go through his most important works up to that point and recreated them in miniature, and then designed them to fit into this suitcase, basically. So that you would have like this whole, his whole oeuvre in like this little portable, which I love containers, I like boxes. So I did my own called Books in a Box from or by Scott McCarney. And this one is an edition, and they're actually digital reproductions or facsimiles of a set of books that only existed in either one-of-a-kind or small editions that had been pretty much distributed and sold out. So I ended up sort of starting this project without really knowing what I was going to do with it, but it ended up, I had these boxes for years. I got these vintage letter storage boxes from the Rochester Public Library bookstore. Shout out to RPL. And knowing I wanted to make an edition of some sort, and this ended up being it. So this is the whole set, all lined up in its finished state here. So the first, and I'll go through these quickly, but they're all in sort of chronological order. This first one predates everything. This is a scroll that I did as a diary in 1974, maybe 1975, and it was patterned after like a hieroglyphic scroll, like an Egyptian scroll here. And I should say that most of the work, I did this while I was a student at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond. Most of the work that I had done at that time was destroyed in a house fire. And for some reason, this one I had mailed to a professor, and after that, he had mailed it back to me. And it had been in an envelope, which I've reconfigured here with with the title. So it was really kind of a real, out of the ashes blast from the past. So anyway, so I did this as a digital facsimile, but more like a calendar with like a spiral binding rather than a scroll, which I still may do it as a scroll. It's really nice as a scroll, but in a separate context here. But this is just like a section. You can see a little bit more closely. Like hieroglyphics, going through, I have absolutely no idea what most of these symbols and things mean. And you can kind of, like the ball and chain, I figure, I had a job. Television, camera, those kinds of things. So, but these, some of these, just really kind of fascinating to think what I must have been doing at the time on that. Another piece, this is called Walk, and this was done the original in 1981, or the first one I should say, because this has taken many forms. The first one was done when I first came to Rochester, and it was basically it was combining photographs I had made on walks in Richmond, Virginia, where I had just moved from, and Rochester, where I had just moved to. The very first one was a one-of-a-kind book that was printed on this, it's like a printing out paper, I think, that you would able to actually, it was a silver surface that you could actually fold though, and it wouldn't crack too badly on that. So that was the very first one. The next one I did was a version that was in a modified album, like this concertina album that I use quite a bit. The conceit of this was each page spread was half of a photograph, and the photograph, like on the right side here, was half of the photograph that's on the left side here when you turn the page. So basically the idea was that the photograph was printed and then folded in half, so it was sort of like conceived as a two-page spread, but it wouldn't be actually seen together. And then that second page relates to the next image in some way, of course the arrow and the fish in through here. But this is two mashed together. So this is the recto and the verso of this fish market in Richmond that shows the two windows together on that. So that's kind of the way the movement through this was made. And also this, moving to a new place, combining different, seeing similar kinds of things. The facsimile, all of the facsimiles turn out to be sort of books within books. So there's all these frames around them. So it pretty much does the same thing, only in a much different, printed form. This is this was again a one-of-a-kind book called Here, There, and Here, or Here, There. And this I did at Visual Studies using the haloid Xerox machine and rubber stamps and color Xerox and stencils, and anything that I had my hands on sort of like was used in making this book here. The facsimile, again, just the book within a book, kind of with this framing. But it used from a collection of postcards of places that I had, kept, and but making these comparisons about like now and then, once or twice, frequently or never, and then like doubling in with all these different kinds of things that are floating above this wonderful, background of which that texture that the haloid would have given. And this is I think it might have been one of the first books that I bound, and I used dental floss, by the way, and it's still in good shape. Another, this was a one-of-a-kind book, Alpha Book 9. So there were 8 alphabets that came before this, and these were all a series of books alphabets that were based on the book form in some way or another. This one, these are all photograms, and they were made in the darkroom as a resident at the light work in Syracuse in their residency program. And again, this is back in like 1985, so this is taking us back a step or two. But what I had done was to take and again, this was like using mural paper, I think at the time, was another stock that you could, or silver-based photo paper you could fold without there being a serious amount of cracking happening. So I was folding these letter forms as sort of pop-up letter forms in the darkroom underneath safe light, and then shooting it with a directional light in that form, and then processing, flattening, and then mounting them. So it gave this really eerie kind of 2D, 3D sense of space, but then also, still recognizable as a letter form. So the facsimile of this actually worked out to be the printing on this was kind of amazing. I did a lot of tests on this to make sure that it would work out okay, but it basically reproduces these in, just in an alphabetical order. It's fine, but still I find it really fascinating what happens, basically when you don't see it. So fixing shadows and then seeing them in a different plane just kind of really excited me on that. So Desert Shield, another early work. This one I did with, in collaboration with Keith Smith, my husband, back in 1990. And this was a play off of Desert Shield, which was the sort of like the police action that George Bush #1 started when Saddam Hussein had invaded Kuwait. And which very soon became Desert Storm, which was the actual ground war that it was, not worthy of poking fun at the way that this particular one basically was. Though I think that food, and war, I think has, probably a bit of a connection, or a little bit of kind of making one feel a little bit better on that. So again, book within a book, and the facsimile. The facsimile is a facsimile of our own copy that has a lot of our own annotations of the recipes, that some of which had, the sugar was left out of the heartburn peach pie. That wasn't so good. But other things, suggestions and things. And all of these recipes were things from friends and relatives that we had collected. So there was that aspect too, of that community and the idea of, collective cookbooks in that sense. Another oldie but goodie, this is Natural and Logical Consequences. This is from 1998. And this was actually a cyanotype book that was made with little kind of photogram cyanotypes. This was the year, and I was teaching a workshop at Bennington College with Judy Natal, co-teaching, and it was right when Bill Clinton was giving this interview about his non-affair with Monica Lewinsky. And there's all this talk about like the blue dress. So cyanotype, cleanliness, this whole thing sort of fed into the creation of this work. The text is from a book I found on like a discarded book on campus that was called Natural and Logical Consequences. So it was basically a psychological text that was talking about how to discipline children, basically. So all these little snippets of text were, quite on point to the situation at hand. There's a wonderful story, I don't know if, I won't read it, but about where how this all came together in a TV viewing room on campus with a bunch of the students. It's kind of an interesting story. So again, Book within a book, same kind of a deal with the, just a digital facsimile. Lost Horizons, this was a very small edition because it was bound in this strap concertina binding, which is rather complex. It was an edition of 5, and the concertina itself carried these kind of reverse gatefolds of panoramic images that were interrupted by texts of some sort or another. This was in 2003 was the first, and this was soon after 9/11. And so this is part of a series of books that were, kind of reflecting on that terror in our time. So this example is a lily pond in Henry Hutchin Park along the in Lower Manhattan, which is basically was in the shadow of the World Trade Center. And the text that's interrupting here is from the New York Times, an article about the fall of the second tower. This one is the Susquehanna River along Route 15, which I used to drive along to go visit my mother, who lived in Virginia. And this one, I was passing signs along the road that had those letters that you would put in, so you could switch things out. Usually it's sort of like, open on Sundays or something like that. And so people were adding, God bless America, support our troops and things, but without taking away the, plums, 3 dozen for $10 or something like that. So I just made records of all of these discordant kind of sympathies between, what was going on and what had been going on, and this rift of language that became as this yellow ribbon that sort of went through the landscape of this text. The digital version of this is actually, I find, to be a lot more satisfying in the sense that it is each of these panoramas has a story of which is written, and this includes the stories, and it's only about this large, so it's much more intimate, and it's just a 3-hole stitch. It's not like a day's worth of binding to put together. Safe, this is another post 9/11 book that was made specifically for an exhibition entitled Love and/or Terror. That was an exhibit and a symposium that took place at the University of Arizona Museum of Art. And it, again, the cleanliness in America theme comes through. It incorporates text that was downloaded from what became the Department of Homeland Security about what to do in case of, like the imminent attacks. It's very reminiscent of the 50s duck and cover kind of mentalities, of which I'd actually made a book about back in the 80s. Which also incorporated imagery from The Wizard of Oz, which is a movie that still kind of gives me chills. So all of these little, seek shelter, blah, 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 and of course, seal the room with duct tape and plastic sheeting. So this book, the images are sealed in plastic bags and duct tape, and then bound, sort of like stab bound in this to the prescription of the Department of Homeland Security. So there's a whole series of sequence and series of different kinds of images, mixtures of things I had made, things that I had found. And then again, the facsimile, book within a book, Surrender Dorothy, and more landscapes of home. The whole series of the green, red, and yellow alerts, here represented by condoms that have their expiration date as September 11th in 2001. On that. Prayer is a one-of-a-kind book. I should say I didn't realize when, this was sort of arbitrary in the sense of how these books came together in this box. They were one of a kind, or as I said, had small edition that were no longer available, but they all ended up to have this this theme going through. It was a little, it's a little worrisome, but anyway, prayer. I made this in honor of my father, who was had a wonderful voice, sang in the church choir, and the Lord's Prayer to music was one of his favorite hymns. So what I had done was to take each of the words of the Lord's Prayer and render the letter forms in outlines. Then each word I would kind of stack all of those letters on top. So like Our Father here, you can see, everything is all crunched together. And then I took the cadence of the poem, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, and then rendered them sort of like spots on a die. So this book is square with rounded corners, and it worked out to be no more than, I don't even know if they were like 6 words within a phrase that would go. But so each one of these kind of comes through, and it was kind of like bringing this kind of sense of chance. My father, died of cancer, so it was all this kind of thing. Again, okay, visit the facsimile is kind of interesting because it isolates the pages on the black ground, which gives it more of that kind of face of the die vibe, I think, on this here. Saints and Sinners, Gay Pride and Straight Shame. This was from 2005. It's a fold book that extends out in, again, like this panorama of the view of the sidelines from a Rochester Gay Pride parade, of all of the protests of the mostly the Christian fundamentalists who show up at every event like this. And the text that runs through is a Bible quote from Luke. Well, I can't give you the chapter and verse on this, but basically it's talking about loving thy neighbor, kind of a thing, and your enemies, about being whatever. So it's kind of like this double-edged idea of practicing what you preach. Also, this was a year when the festival after the parade was at the Highland Bowl, and I'm sure that the Christians love this, but just at the end of the parade, it was getting darker and darker and darker, and there was a deluge. I mean, really, it was like incredible. I've never seen it rain so hard. I got home and the pockets in my shorts were filled with water. That's how. Anyway, so there's this sort of like this frame of the storm and then the water and stuff coming through here. That's what that's about. So this is not in the box, but it's a good transition. This is Searching for Myself from 2017. This is a digital book that is basically, it's a image search of one of my images, again, with this theme. This was the picture that I dragged into that little box. And then these were the suggestions of doppelgangers that I got. And there were 16 pages, exactly 16 pages that it worked out. Because what I had done was I made my screen to the proportion of the book, so I could make screenshots of each one. It turned out to be just 16 pages of these. And obviously, I mean, the algorithms have gotten much more sophisticated since then. This was obviously going for the background and the glasses. But then again, I mean, there's some of these things that came up that are just kind of hilarious. But then there's things like Martin Scorsese, Louis C.K. I mean, a whole bunch of celebrities ended up too, which I thought was, kind of interesting. Anyway. And then the pandemic. This is a photograph that Joan Lyons made of me at the George Eastman Museum soon after it was allowing people in, all shielded. And I forget the exhibit, but it's a wonderful little selfie station that we made. But during this, oh gosh, when everybody was kind of rethinking everything, I've been involved with the mail art community back in the 70s, and pretty much consistently on and off. But I started this project of going into my address book, my handwritten address book that I'd kept over the years, and just started making collage postcards, sending out to people at least the addresses I knew that were people I knew that were still living. So that sort of ginned up this idea again of working within the mail system, and started this project that I called Exquisite Matryoshka. And the exquisite part of this references the Exquisite Corpse, which was a surrealist game where a piece of paper would be folded, and one person would draw a head and fold it back, the next would do the torso, and so on. So when it was opened up, it would get this, kind of this interesting subconscious kind of a drawing or collage. But the idea here was that you really you didn't know what the last person had made. You just had a little hint of it through some, where the head ends and the torso should begin. And then the Matryoshka refers to Russian dolls. This is a set from the 90s that was the US ambassador to Russia. This was soon after the end of the Soviet Union. And then all of these, the president and blah, 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 all the way through down to a little one that had the American and Russian flag here, but all these, set inside of each other. So the idea with this was I would start with a postcard, and I would do a little collage of some sort on it. This is the recto and verso of these. And then I would put it in an envelope, a little bit larger, and on that envelope I would put something that is a prompt, something that refers to the collage that was made, something that was referred to the image or something that was already there. And then the next person would get that, not knowing what's in the envelope, but only with that prompt would then respond to that in some way, put it in a little bit larger envelope, and then with a little prompt and send it back to me. This is in theory. And then, it would go back and forth that way. So it started out, I started with someone I collaborate quite a bit with in New York. I sent it to him, I never heard anything back. The next one I sent to an artist here in Rochester, and then I got an email saying, oh, thanks for the nice collage postcard. So then I just started I just did it for myself. So I was sending it back and forth to myself as a test. And which was sort of great because I got really good mail, but it was interesting because I really could not remember what it was. I just would have that little bit of response or that little prompt. So this is the first set of the ones, and this one I bound as a little fold book, so that you could actually stretch it out and see both the image side and the address side going back and forth through here. This is a layout of one that I did with Martha O'Connor, which was really, she's a great personality. And what we did with this, since we only know what we did, we don't know what the other person did. So we have these, I call them openings, but this one we did at Colleen Buzzard's studio with Martha and me, going back and forth and just opening the envelope and being surprised by what it was you were actually responding to. So, but what's uncanny is that when you begin looking at this thing, and I don't know, there's some weird kind of gestalt that happens through this that makes some sort of sense. I'm not sure. So part of this idea is for me to document those works and to make a documentation, again, a digital, if you will, facsimile, but in this case, taking, doing it in scale so that you have the envelope, you have the postcards, and then the envelopes. In this case, they go through. This is one that I did with Liz, and which was a wonderful. It was just turned out to be an amazing piece in its printed form, because this is the one where you go through, and there's an incredible symbiotic kind of progression through this. This is Howard, by the way. I keep thinking everybody knows almost everyone here knows each other. So, and then this is one of the last ones I did with myself that was truly had the post office hand in it. This was the last. They usually go up to the about 12 by 18 inch, the largest commercially available envelope that I could find. This is usually the ending of these things. So they always end up to be about that large. And I had, decorated with a bunch of different stamps, took it to the post office to see if I needed more postage. And she says, oh no, you have more on here than you need. So, but then she put this little indicia in here that said no, 00, whatever. Well, I don't know. I'd sort of forgotten about it, but it must have been a couple months later. I get a little sticker on my door, a little pink slip from the post office saying, you have a package that's, postage due. So I went out to Jefferson Road and I handed them the package, and he looked at it and he came back and he brought this, and all of this stuff, this, postage due, 112, all adding up all of the, the stamps, you can tell the thinking. But my favorite is this arrow that goes diagonally, the same address. I mean, I could just see some postal guy like freaking out. I mean, what's going on here? And then I was thinking, they probably thought I was going to get away with cheating the post office of $1.12 because they would send it back because it didn't have enough postage on it, but it's the same address. Anyway, but okay. So anyway, I'll end with just a photo of a male artist, as a young man there on that song. So thank you.
We get to ask you questions.
Yes, please do.
Ask questions. Oh, you thought I had one. Oh. That's what it seems like. It's usually Roy that has one. You got one? No, I'm not going away. Well, let's just start with what really captured your interest early on. What sent you down the road in the beginning?
Well, I don't, I asked my parents for a typewriter when I was 11 years old. Not so much to write, but to make like typewriter art, like to see words in print. So the visual aspect of books and printing was very, very early. I mean, I was one of those kind of nerdy kids that hung out in the library, and books were always a part of my kind of consciousness. And making them, I would even in grade in high school, I would figure out ways of turning an assignment into a book, I guess. So, yeah, so that was, it's hard to say. It was sort of like, I always think of, because people sometimes ask me, well, where do your ideas come from? Which, that's a very hard one, and that's actually related, but easier to describe, I think. But I always think about clouds, like I've seen clouds like disappear, but I've never seen a cloud actually form in nature. I mean, I've seen it like in the laboratory and the theory and whatever, but on a summer day, lying back, looking at the sky, I've never actually seen a cloud form. So that's kind of my metaphor, I guess. I'm not exactly sure, but in terms of the interest, I've always had sort of a, between that and photography as well. Photography has always been an interest.
I'm appreciating the themes through some of your work around responses to a political moment. And of course, I appreciate the question about the origins, but I'm kind of wondering about where you're feeling inspired to respond in these times.
Well, there's a book fair this Saturday. That's next Saturday in a week. That's going to be at the RIT, new RIT space. There's some cards here. If you're not already, I'm sure everybody's aware of this. I'm going to have a table there, and I will have some examples of that. This work really is all, is pretty, the newest work is really work about the old work. So what I've been doing, in fact, I haven't really been doing that much. I've been sort of in, like, working in the background mode, but there's certain things that have squeaked through. So I'll have a few pieces on the table that are about that, but I'm sure it's a very difficult thing. I mean, I feel like, most of my time's been more like, painting signs and that kind of a thing, and sort of working around how to process this fire hose of insanity. But but come by. I do have some things. We'll have some things there.
Sort of on those lines, you have this sort of playful back and forth between material and like a subject, and you just said you paint signs when we're dealing with all sorts of things that require painting signs and perhaps protesting. Do you think you would ever make a book like from those signs and any sort of a playful back and forth there?
Yeah. Actually, one of the pieces that I did is they're actually it's called it's post reality cards. It's a set of postcards that do represent some of the signs that I've made in that. So they're slowly kind of, but text is another thing. I mean, I'm very, I should say, like, the typewriter wasn't really about writing, but I do love language, and I like the way that language can just take something and turn it on its head. And so a lot of the language stuff that I do is coming out, a lot of the reactions that I'm having is coming through language. And yeah, but again, it's still kind of raw. I don't like, I'm not really good at putting stuff out that hasn't been really considered in my own space. Another description I used.
Explain a little bit. I didn't quite get.
I usually describe my practice as I'm a graphic designer that has one client who's like a dream and a nightmare. He's a dream because the projects that you're given to do are incredible, but it's a nightmare because it's the son of a bitch is hard to please. And it's a committee of one, and no one else has any say. You have to kind of like follow this thing. So I have this committee, and I can't, and I am very critical of my own work. You know, more than I maybe need to be, but that's just the way that I am. So, yeah. Is that?
Sort of. I noticed that the Twin Towers was 2001, and the book that you did, or the image that I saw, was 2003. So there's a time lapse between.
Yeah.
It's not like that image of the passionate artist who responds immediately to what's going on around them. It takes a while for that digestion to happen, and so within the time period now, it hasn't ended. It's still going on, and it's getting more so. So maybe the digestion time, being able to deal with it, is extended. I'm just curious what your thoughts are of that, being creative in this time period.
Yeah, that's true. Because I have a whole library of books that were done in the first Trump administration. The first Trump administration that are packaged under the rubric of the magnetic field of revulsion. And but the thing is, I've taken these things to book fairs, and it's like kryptonite to Superman. I mean, people just will not touch them, and I can understand. Maybe I'll bring one on Saturday, but generally I don't, because it's kind of it's traumatizing still. And this is, because I think we're kind of still, it's 2.0, and it's like really ramped up. So work that I did during the W administration too, and they're not like the one I did with Bush was called Live, Evil, Vile. And they were images from photographs of probably a State of the Union that he had done. And he was always, I don't know if you remember, but he was always like making up words or like mixing up words or kinds of things. So it was basically taking one, I had taken one, oh gosh, it's been so long. Anyway, but it was basically remixing, doing anagrams of all of this stuff, of finding different ways of this one phrase that he had said. So anyway, but stuff like that, that's like trying to, it's critical, but still trying to not, go over the edge with it, of trying to, a little bit of self-care, maybe, creatively.
So you have a little backlog of stamps. I noticed a whole bunch of Sawyers.
Yeah, those are beautiful sheets. My grandfather worked for the post office in East Aurora, New York, and would send me, stamp sheets and the block, the blocks, and I would do first day of issues and all that. I'm sort of a stamp collector. Unfortunately, that's another thing that was lost in that house fire. But I've still kept stamps, and then have, I see them as little collage elements, on the front of your envelope.
How did you react to your house fire as an artist?
Well, yeah, it was more, I didn't even think about that because of it was my parents' place where I was storing things. So that was, I didn't even think about, because this is all stuff that I'd done in the, like work that I'd done in school, and, I mean, I kept my negatives. So I had negatives of like photographs that were lost and things. I gave that up myself, and then, but I went out and I found another one. Not the same, it's a Smith Corona, but it wasn't the same, I couldn't find the same color, anyway. So I still have one, but yeah. Yeah.
Another hand, how about you here?
It's me.
Oh.
I was just curious if you could tell us about a particularly memorable interaction you've had with somebody who's encountered your work.
Oh, very interesting. Well, one of the nice things about books is that you really don't have to have an interaction with people. You send them out, and then then you'll hear back. But the most interesting interactions I've had is when I'm somewhere, when I'm like, if I'm in Mexico or somewhere in a different culture, and because a lot of my work is kind of Americentric. I mean, I'm responding to American themes, to American art, to these for the most part. And Duchamp is exception, but so getting, I just, especially Latin Americans, I mean, I just love showing them my work, because they see things that I just don't see, and I've learned an awful lot. So I would say, like, as a blanket, I'd found that that's been really terrific. But generally, though, yeah, it's like, putting it in the mail or something, and yeah. But then there is that of that package set of the first Trump things of people just. That's a very visceral kind of a reaction.
People are allowed to touch your books.
Oh yeah.
I didn't know.
Oh yeah. No, I'm sorry. Oh yeah. That's especially because, well, it's interesting. Book fairs generally are, because the books are out on the table, and it's a very welcoming kind of venue for work. It's not like, last year I had a table at an actual art fair. It's called Art on Paper in New York, and the Center for Book Arts, where I do virtual teaching for them, had invited members to so I was there at a table, and it was like an art fair, like booths with stuff on the wall that people weren't allowed to touch. So people were kind of going through there, and then they'd come over to the table where the books were, and it was like they didn't know what to do. It was like, can we touch this? Yeah, please do. Because then they didn't know what they were looking at either. But but book fairs generally, you get a more educated crowd. Yeah.
Did I read that you were one of the judges of the part of the book?
Gerald Mean and I were the judges of the altered book and paper sculpture
Can you give
section.
us some comments about the submissions and what you found?
Well, I mean, it's yeah. Well, it's like any the process. I mean, it's all done by slides, and we go through independently, looking at the work, and then we rate them, and then they do the numbers, and then every work that's above a certain number gets included. And then they bring the works together, which is really great, and the awards are done in person, so that's really important. But then, you see things like, look great in the slide, it was like, oh, totally misrepresented. That happens too. But, at this point, who can say? So I think, kudos to the library for doing this. It's a tremendous amount of work, as anybody who's done anything like that knows. And it's just like it's the 14th year. It has, I forget how many submissions they had from how many states, how many countries. I mean, it's really been out there. In fact, I think there were less local submissions than there were from people from away, which I thought was really, really interesting. Yeah, I don't want, on the flip side, I always think, and this is not just this year, but I juried once before, a long time ago, and with Jerry. We did it together with Timothy, and it was different because it was still in the days when you looked at, was it real slides or was it digital? I guess maybe it was digital slides, but we did it together. And it was very different because we had a dialogue about the work, which was a lot more fun than sitting there looking at your screen and trying to figure things out by yourself. But the comments were, gee, this is a much smaller show than we've had in the past. And I kind of liked that because you could actually see the work in those cases. It really is, I think there's just too much work to squeeze in, and the display, the display suffers, the works suffer. Anyway, that's my criticism, is more. But on the other hand, you know, it is a community event. They want to be as inclusive as possible, and it's, I think it's great. Have you seen it?
Not yet. Roy has.
Oh yeah, Roy was.
But I'm waiting for the knee replacement, so it's fresh. So I have to judge my activity very carefully.
Yeah.
So come to see.
Well, thank you. I'm flattered that I passed the knee test.
See you.
One question. I'm curious about, because looking at the body of your work, there are so many different materials, processes, types of book binding, structures, and can you talk a little bit just about how you choose what book structure for which project or which binding technique for which project?
Yeah, a lot of times it's like it's a conversation really between what I'm working on and how I want it presented. So it'll kind of go back and forth. That walk book that I illustrated is a great example because it started out as like a stab, like a Japanese, so it never didn't lie flat. That's why I had a rock on it to keep it open. And then the concertina binding, which does lay nice and flat, but it's a very fussy kind of a structure. And then I've done that facsimile that's in the set is different than other facsimiles that I've done. I've done a small one. I've tried very different things with it, and each one is very different. So yeah, I kind of experiment and see what happens with it, and trying to be conscious of that, of the reading of what is, if it's doing what I would like it to do, or of discovering what it's doing and thinking, oh, I never would have done that, but that actually kind of works. So it's very much a process. But integrating that whole kind of the making with the thinking in some ways. Not that it's done simultaneously, because I have to step back from something, from making it in order to really see it. So, and I can't make it thinking about it too much. They're two different kind of parts of my brain.
Not exactly sure how to formulate this question, but I'm thinking of it. You have so many different things that you've saved, it seems like. So are you really organized, and you have, like old maps that someone drew, or these little pieces of a book, or, like I've saved all my old journals and different things like that, and I always wonder, this gave me inspiration that, well, maybe they won't totally go to waste. I could make them into something else, or to a piece of a book or something. It's kind of, got some wheels turning, but are you organized, or are you just got a lot of stuff?
Yeah, I'm a little OCD when it comes to that. I think people would probably, yeah. And miraculously, I can kind of remember where things are. I don't know. I hope that I'm waiting for that not to happen, about not being able to find things because they're tucked away in odd places. And yes, I do have a lot of stuff, but yeah, I encourage you to kind of go back and sort of putting things together. Because it really, even just, I've done a lot of teaching and I've taught a lot of photographers and a lot of artists who I can tell are never going to make a book again in their life, but they really come out of the experience seeing what they're doing differently because of those relationships that happen in a book that are different from just the way you're thinking about it, the way you usually think about it, I guess. So,
Do you save everything? I mean,
No.
you have little doodles.
Everything. Well, I've been doing, I have a whole nother kind of collage life, which is another, kind of, that's a dream and a nightmare for organizing and collecting, but that's a whole nother kettle of fish. Yeah. Sometimes with collage, disorganization is better than organization, I'm finding.
Right.
The hand-drawn maps really got me.
I love that.
Granted, the fact that it occurred to you to keep those, I would have trashed those so fast.
right.
And now, great, you have these amazing pieces of almost like cave art, almost feels like. Is it true?
Oh, thanks. That's the oldest I've felt in a while.
I mean, it's
Yeah,
like
I
an
know.
impressionistic, symbolic sense that we don't really know what it meant. That's what I mean.
Yeah, and also they're memories. Everything in that is a memory of some sort. It's a memory of places you've been, of people you've stayed with, or had traveled with, or had gone to see, or all of that is kind of like embedded. Whereas our little thing here, it just doesn't cut it. Yeah. So it did have some hieroglyphics in there. That's almost as old.
I'll see the phrase that continues to stick with me from one of your pieces is around gay pride and straight shame. I'm very interested in sort of the gay or the queer creative imagination, and also really interested in you having done some work with your husband. And so I'm wondering about how your identity as a gay artist or a queer artist, if you would use that term, like how that is inspiring your work or how that influences your work, and maybe how being in creative relationship with your husband influences your work.
Yeah, it's interesting because in terms of like identities, and because I just have always ever since I used to knit sweaters for my G.I. Joe on the school bus. Okay, so I've been called queer for a very long time. But I was knitting. I've always been doing something, and so I think my identity as an artist or as a maker has always been primary over being gay or queer or married or it's sort of been it's the one that kind of like it's the through line of pretty much everything. So and also my experiences of gay culture coming from up through the like the late 60s through the 70s and whatever also kind of informs what, my thinking. As an older, Paleolithic specimen, but yeah. So it's interesting because I feel like that is because everything is just all kind of a stew. It's embedded, and I don't consciously, unless it's thematically, of course, bring that through. Remember that there was this was back, I don't know how, it was a long time ago. The Image Out, the film festival, started an image art program, and they had an exhibition. And I remember I had submitted, I had won an award or something. This was quite a while ago. But the Empty Closet at the time, which was the newspaper tabloid, had it must have been the biggest headline I've ever seen. Scott McCarney, gay artist. And I remember somebody looking at that and saying, overhearing someone saying, is he out? And the person holding the table says, well, he is now. But it was, it's kind of like this weird kind of cultural, and then the personal kind of either, I'm trying to think of, the comfort level, I guess, maybe, that one has had, and just balance it against what one deals with. Certainly.
Thank you. Well, there aren't any more questions, but thank you so much